scenography and resistance in Latin America. So we're continuing with the conversation about where we are now. But for this panel, we're sort of located geopolitically in Latin America. It's wonderful. We're very excited about it. Of course, Latin America has been a great part of PQ since its beginnings, but I don't think we've it's been a long time for sure since we've had a panel focused on Latin America. So this is very special for us. And with that, I would like to invite our first speaker on the floor, Karla Rodríguez, architect and professor of architecture from Mexico. Please welcome.
So, hi, thank you. Well, I'm glad to be here, and I'm here with Alicia Laguna, and we are part of the curatorial team of Mexico for the next PQ. So what we are going to share this afternoon is the approaching that we are having for this exhibition. So we prepared a text, so I'm going to read it. Let me find it. And okay, I'm going to start there. A theater where many worlds fit. That's the name of this starting point of the project. Is there life on Earth? With that question in mind and body, the 4 women, 2 men, and 1 Otroa, a non-binary individual, set sail from Isla Mujeres on May 3rd, 2021, a year ago. This group embarked on the journey for life. The most recent Zapatista theatrical appearance, which will be the core of Mexican participation in PQ 23. The journey for life is a conquest in reverse, say the Zapatistas. It is about traveling the inverse path that the European conquerors followed precisely 500 years ago in that what we now call America. This area of the planet came into existence when European imperial powers of the 16th century civilized and with the conquest incorporated these lands and those who inhabited them into the rest of the modern world. A conquest in reverse does not appeal to revenge, not the futile reversal of the roles of history. Hunter hunted, the conqueror conquered, the rapist raped. Not to the demand for the impossible restoration of an unpayable historical debt. It is a question, perhaps, of setting a trap to time and thought. I mean, to the unique thought and to the linear time of homogeneous time of modernity. If every conquest imposes on the other an accumulation of beliefs, ways of life, ways of being, and ways of perceiving the world, a conquest in reverse perhaps proposes a voice. That is the indeterminacy that culminates in pure speculation that has the question as its answer. How to make the world again? A world where many worlds fit, says the Zapatistas. In their unusual loom, say Juan Villoro, the Zapatistas draw something that does not yet exist, a tomorrow that we take on logic as the wrap as defined, made with threads that come from far away, from the tradition that does not forget the future. Thanks to this peculiar use of time, they have the rarest of utopias, the one that is possible. 2, a mountain on the high seas. On a centennial ship baptized as La Montaña, the mountain, the travelers crossed the Atlantic Ocean from the Mexican coast to the port of Vigo in Galicia, Spain. There, just before disembarking, they display a banner to read again the Zapatistas' invitation to the people of that land called Europe. Awake. If in 1996, from the mountains of Chiapas, Mexico, the Zapatista Army of National Liberation called for all sentient forms of life from other planets in the galaxy to an intergalactic encounter, in 2021, in the middle of the pandemic, the Zapatistas broke out the confinement to embark on a search for what remains of life on Earth, to embark on encounter with the other, the human and not human other, that which lives and steers beyond the confines of the Zapatistas' horizon, to seek it first in Europe, then in the 5 continents, other unsubmissive modes of existence and life, to the project of homogenization, commodification, dispossession, and death, imposed from the hardcore of capital and spread across the face of the planet. The travelers disembarked in Europe to look, to listen, to meet the others, and to be grateful for its existence. In their own words, they said, to be grateful for the teaching that their rebellion and resistance have given us, to deliver the promised flower, to embrace the other, and to say in its ear that this is not alone. To whisper that it is worth, to whisper that it is worth the resistance, the struggle, the pain for those who are no longer here, the rage that the criminal is unpunished, the dream of a world that is not perfect, but a better world, a world without fear. And also, and above all, we will seek complicity for life. The journey through life began with a mountain and sea, and continue by air with the extemporary delegation. It is delayed in rehearsals, still in Zapatista territory, to face the vicissitudes and catastrophe that they could face during the trip. The attack of a whale, of a giant squid, or a storm that would make them shipwrecked, or a bureaucratic procedure that would make it difficult for them to obtain a Mexican passport. This last danger did happen. They carved and painted wooden canoes in which they learned how to paddle and ride the waves. They built a simulacrum of the mountain. To rehearse their trip, they built an airplane with logs and plastic tarps and made parachutes with color embroidery so that instead of a D-Day in Normandy, it will be a C-Day for Europe. Below, and it will seem them that from the sky, flowers will rain as if Ixchel, Mother Goddess, Rainbow Goddess, will accompany us, and by her hand and her flight, open a second front from the invasion. 3, appearing. The subaltern is necessarily the absolute limit of the place where history's narrative is set into logic, said Spivak. Such is the problem that the Zapatistas posed to themselves more than 30 years ago, a political problem, but above all an aesthetical problem, a theatrical problem by excellence, appear. How to appear before the gaze of a nation for which Indians are the faceless, the shadow. They are the voiceless, noise, pure babbling, the part without a part, subaltern systematically, excluded from the representation of the Mexican, and of the nation that wants to be mestizo and modern. On January 1st, in 1994, the day that Mexico would join the first world modernity promised by the neoliberal regime that was then spread throughout almost all of America and all the world, there is no alternative. Remember, Margaret Thatcher, a world is split apart. The day that the free trade agreement with the United States and Canada came into force, the day that wealth would bring the trickle from the bottom up, and we would finally be satisfied with the given world without the need to keep turning the engine of history. On that day, the first day of 1994, the Zapatistas appeared, masked with baklavas, carrying weapons, some real and others made of sticks, and took San Cristobal de las Casas, the royal city, the colonial city, until then, the nest of one of the most racist societies in Mexico. The Zapatista revolutionary movement is made up of people with Mayan roots, inhabitants of the mountains and jungles of the Mexican Southeast, communities that are splinters of worlds devastated by the wars of conquest and colonial violence enforced over 500 years. For Jacques Rancière, political activity consists in displacing a body from the place assigned to it or changing the destiny of a place, in making what was unseen visible, in making what was audible as mere noise heard as speech. So we think it's possible to assign the same task to theatrical practice. A theater to come that rehearses other stories, other narratives, other logics. And to appear. The Zapatistas choose war, but also theater. Another theater that conjures up spectral archives hidden by Western tradition, revealing and occluding a clandestine genealogy, a theater that draws a long-term temporal arc. The Zapatistas retake a staging that has been displayed before our eyes for centuries, even if not all of us can contemplate. A theater in which very diverse beings and existence, human and not human, divinities, geological forces, ghosts, animals, plants, ancestral figures participate. Morton's hyper objects, La Polla de minor existences. It is necessary to be able to listen, to watch, to listen the voices and the presence of all of them. ¿Escucharon? Did you hear? It is the sound of your world collapsing. It is that of ours rising anew. Zapatismo nothing but an update of an ancestral rebellion that crosses generation, disorganizing the organization of mimesis, rejoicing with the plasticity of emergent special spaces, with the bad use of technologies to interrupt the apparatus of control and discipline, contaminating the message and the calls to order, insidiously profaning to subvert them, archaic and residual forms of those public secrets on which we founded modern societies: work, money, state, nation, justice, history, democracy, art. 4, masking. A ruler wages continuous warfare against spontaneous and uncontrolled metamorphosis. The weapon he uses is the fight in this process of unmasking, the stacked opposite of metamorphosis. If it is practiced often, the whole world shrinks. The Zapatista theater appeals in the strongest sense to the power of the negative, a theater that is upside down. To appear, they disappear. To show themselves, they hide. To make the roar of their demands heard, they remain silent. To command, they obey. The balaclava, the ventriloquism, the fictitious characters, the disappearance, the transfiguration, and the Nahualism, to be one and to be other, to be animal and human. The props, weapons, the little paper airplanes launched over the walls to invade by air a real military barracks. The scenographies where their multitudinous performances take place, presential, virtual, and hybrid. The silent walks that on the day of the end of the world, in December 21, 2012, trace over the national territory their poetry, which is an omen. The fables and the poetry that in loud voice are only some of the theatrical elements which they usually play. A game capable of producing the stage, the nettings, or the surfaces necessary to promote the juncture between the diverse worlds and ways of existing that necessarily require what some have called a cosmic diplomacy that assumes the failed translation and interferences, that cancels all logic of idealized transcendence and reconciliation, but that bets on desire. But that bets on desire, and not on justice represented as a program assimilable to the civilizational model that has dominated history. Its strategy is to reduce tactics to an intervention into the space of social effervescence, into an economy of the give and expenditure with a rigorous insistence on the non-accumulation of power. Zapatismo radically deconstructs revolutionary logic. We could usurp the father's position, the space of authority, only to decree a new law. The Zapatista theater, indiscernible from the way of sowing the earth, of learning and teaching, of narrating history and imagining the future, of representing and governing oneself, of giving voice and listening, indiscernible from life itself in its territory of Zapatista autonomy, is entrenched in desire, constructs a war machine that preaches desire, that celebrates it, that transforms it absolutely. The desire to awake, that sudden realization of rare and unmasked face of the real that is projected on our face, or our baklava, launching us into the future. The desire that the world, that life does not shrink and feel like just in that instant before awaiting, dreaming of many worlds. P.S. Zapatist imagination has resounded with force in different calendars and geographies. Like itself, without the striving of originality, it feeds on threads that come from very far away, from a tradition that does not forget the future, and leaves loose ends for other forces to take up and wave with them the images of their desires. There is no doubt that revolutions, like elephants, are contagious. So thank you. I hope it.
Thank you very much, Carla, for your presentation. We're now continuing with the curatorial team from Brazil, zooming in. We're going to have 3 representatives of their team. So please join me in welcoming Heloisa Lyra Bulcão, Renato Bolelli Rebouças, and Sergio Lessa.
Hi, good afternoon. We are now sharing our presentation. Renato, can you share the presentation with us?
Oh,
it's not showing.
Again, okay. Can you see?
Yeah.
Yes, we can see. Thank you.
Okay.
Good. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Our part of the Brazilian curatorial body is formed by 12 curators of countries and regions and fragments exhibition in a collective and democratic movement. Despite we are many, we still don't have any support and we couldn't have the opportunity to be present. And I need to reinforce that we tried until the last minute. Then we would like to thank the organization of the PQ 2023 for letting us to be part of this event, also allowing us to present online. Let's start. We choose to present artistic creation as a confrontation with the politics and destruction of contemporary Brazil. As a country, we have a colonial origin and a long history of fighting for equal rights. After 20 years of civil military dictatorship until 1980s, we had many achievements, especially during the 13 years of a more progressive government until 2026. 16, sorry. When the destruction of the destitution of the present occurred and we arrived at a current far-right government. The Ministry of Culture was extinguished and became part of the Ministry of Tourism, where a series of artistic demonstrations across the country against the control and manipulation of our culture. This policy of destruction can be seen in the fire that spreads through several centers of preservation of culture and sciences, symbols of Brazil identity. The first burning occurred at the Museum of Portuguese Language. Following this process, we also had the cases of fire at the National Museum and at the Brazilian Cinematheque that destroyed a significant part of the Brazilian audiovisual collection. After the extinction of the Ministry of Culture, the nominated secretary, a famous theater director, made a speech that was very similar to the speech of the Nazi Joseph Goebbels, which caused a great indignation among artists. He was distinguished and replaced by a famous Brazilian actress. Her nomination caused deep anger because of her extreme positions espousing conservative proposals and narrow views of culture. These frequent changes of Secretary of Culture continues until today, unfortunately. Brazil is constantly highlighted in the world media due to the destruction of our environmental policies. This fire is also attacking many biomes, such as Amazon forest and Pantanal, expanding an alert of urgency of international agreements for environmental preservation. Another cause of growing deforestation in Brazil is the illegal extraction of wood. Many scandals involved the Ministry of Environment that was directly trying to liberate the sales of this illegal wood. The most recent crisis is the illegal mining process that is taking place in demarcated indigenous land with a lot of violence. The government does not interfere against criminal acts, but the federal police succeed sometimes, as in this image, they took fire on these mining boats. This disrespect with the indigenous people, land, and culture generated a series of confrontations through the country with several indigenous peoples demonstration in fights for their rights. Unfortunately, in many countries, minorities have been under attack. In Brazil, Black people are 54% of the population, and despite that, we also have strong historical and structural racism. The most serious and recent case happened with a Black man that was murdered by the security guards at the Carrefour supermarket. In the same way as it happens in the American George Floyd, asphyxiated until death. There was also a commotion in relation to the Congolese immigrant Moise, who was launched to death in his workplace, and he has gone only just to ask for his salary. We also noticed a huge number of cases of intolerance towards Afro-Brazilian religions because they are constantly associated with Black magic and demonization. We still talk about the persecution of sexual and gender minorities. During the book biennale, the comic book Avengers, The Children's Crusade, was confiscated due to the illustration of two boys kissing. The censorship of the Political and Ideological Act also closed the exhibition Queer Museum Cartographies of Difference in Brazil Art. They considered it as an apology of homosexuality, pedophilia, and blasphemy. Sound is closed, Heloisa.
Sorry. Good afternoon. All this panorama has been worsening, including this return of censorship against artistic works. Another example occurred with the musician Chico Buarque, who had lots of work censored during the dictatorship of the 70s. Recently, a documentary about him had the exhibition prohibited. Marighella, a film about an important politician, writer, and guerrilla who organized the fight against the dictator regime, was also prohibited now. In the theater, we had performances censored too. This play had its exhibition forbidden in a federal cultural center for having words contrary to the government. A monologue with a transvestite actress in which she plays a transgender Jesus was censored. The left performance was prohibited from occupying a scenic space at the National Arts Foundation by the director of the organ for criticism of Nazis. In the right performance, the public was invited to participate, manipulating an articulated object and the performer's body. He was accused of pedophilia because of the participation of a child from the audience. Turning to the sanitary situation, with a strong denial of the COVID pandemic by the government, the country became a chaos. Rows of graves were dug to bury the hundreds of dead. At the right, piles of unburied bodies found in a cemetery. There were numerous manifestations regarding to the situation experienced due to the COVID, with immense visual impact, as this at Copacabana Beach, organized by a father who lost his child. Many workers lost their jobs and misery increased, worsening the economic situation. These are real images reveal the despair of hungry people. We see a truck with skins and bones and leftovers and meat scraps being disputed. A vida tá osso, which strictly means life is bone, is a Brazilian expression that means a hard and difficult life. An organization made a manifest during a protest against the government, offering people a big bone, asking, why is life bone for you? And they filmed their responses. Artists began to create installations and manifests occupying the streets. This is an action performed by artists in a great avenue due to the arrival of 500,000 deaths by COVID in 2000 and 2021. The worsening of the political, health, cultural, and economic situation provoked protests throughout the country, inciting activism and reinforcing the relationship between arts and life and politics. This installation was created due to the execution of the Black councilor woman who used to fight against police and militia violence in the favelas. She was shot dead in a car, and the suspects were not accused yet, although already known and related to the current president. The collective articulation of indigenous people in Brazil has been organizing the free land camp in the country's capital for 18 years. It's the largest mobilization of the indigenous movement, which traditionally occupies Brasilia for 10 days to claim the rights guaranteed in the Constitution. With their bodies painted with mud and red paint, alluding to blood, thousands of indigenous people marched through the streets of the country's capital in yet another protest against illegal mining. With the pain of the loss of the elderly during the pandemic, with the pain of the loss of the elderly during the pandemic in 2021, indigenous peoples, aware of having the strength of the ancestors by their side, made a virtual march with people holding candles and LED lamps to be seen in distance. In a great ritual with not only artistic intention, it's where life and art are mixed. It's not just a physical and social territorial dispute, but a symbolic narrative dispute. Let's sense a bit of it.
Good afternoon. So, decolonization practice have become a process of artistic resistance that manifests itself in different languages. In the visual arts, the installation Rebirth by Ciro Franco, in honor of the victims of the pandemic and health professionals, imagine a population that floats on the ground, referring to the idea of being born, dying, and being reborn. The need to be on the streets, offering our counter-narrative, is also visible in the theatre and in the performance arts. The intervention Reverse, a site-specific performance and film by Teatro da Vertigem, in collaboration with the artists Nuno Ramos and many others, created a funeral procession with 120 cars, which moved in the opposite direction on the lanes in reverse in São Paulo, in a 4-hour journey that ended in a cemetery, criticizing a Brazil that walks in the opposite direction. Another artist is Uira Sodoma, a hybrid performer who mixes scientific and ancestral knowledge, a tree that walks, or an entity of the animals and plants, using organic materials as an integral part of nature. She defends that the indigenous entity is among us, celebrating the richness of the rivers in the Amazon rainforest, and also denouncing that the region, where does she come from, is one of the 5 worst cities in the country in terms of basic sanitation, making grow the water contamination. Uira also seeks to make visible that the Anthropocene has turned its back on social violence and environmental destruction. Jaider Esbel proposes to make visible the entities of his people, the Makushi ethnicity, with 2 snakes, 17 meters each, occupying different places in the cities. Symbol of fertility and abundance, the snakes work permanently to protect, alert, and keep alive native peoples alive. Listening to the dream to enchant the matter, listening to difference as a strategy for re-enchanting the world. The indigenous scene is growing strongly in Brazil, reflecting the absolute diversity and beauty, including many performances and also a digital platform bringing together artists from many ethnicities. Indigenous theater as a counter-colonization. Not only on stage, but also the audience becomes a scenographic space that resists. Concert for the Wardrobe makes visible the work of costume designers, makers, and the entire technical team, usually invisible, offering presence and dance for the costumes and ritualizing lives. And we still have online and video production, such as Bubble, a video dance about distancing that question. Is it possible to cross barriers that condition us and limit us? Can we see possible ways to resist and break our bubbles? Who are we? But it's Carnival.
E no topo do
But it's Carnival, the greatest spectacle on earth takes place, as they say around here. That joy transforms everything, integrating art and protest into a huge and magic party. Yes, it is. This year, the winner was the Grande Rio School of Samba with the theme of Exu, a powerful Afro-Brazilian entity, an orisha that represents the messenger, the guardian. We see Exu on the top of the world, to whom we make requests that Exu blows into the universe. Exu lives on the streets, and he has the 7 keys that open the 7 doors of the world. And it's with him that we end our presentation, asking for his ashes to cross the injustice, to reveal the wonders of the global territory. His hypnotic smile reminds us that we are alive. Good night, madam. Good night, sir. We do believe. Laroye, Laroye Exu. Ashe, a word that means divine force, joy, thank you. And we thank all of you on behalf of the Brazilian curatorial body of countries and regions.
Thank you very much, Heloisa, Renato, Sergio. The last presenter in today's session is Marcela Oteíza, designer and professor of design at Wesleyan University.
Hello, everybody, and thank you. We're going to change gears dramatically, I think, because this is a paper focusing one particular aspect and one particular thing within the Chilean situation right now. So we'll just start. Hi, my talk today is entitled "The Object Tells the Truth, Baquedano Statue as Witness of Social Change at Plaza Dignidad, Santiago, Chile." This work is part of a larger research project that focuses on objects of a street performance, in which I'm trying to tease apart the role of the performance objects within the public space and its performance, as well as how a better understanding of the blur that exists between performance objects and objects of resistance can help us better understand where are we today. Scenography and therefore performance objects are an intrinsic element of co-construction of meaning within a performance. I argue here that in a similar fashion, scenographic objects such as Baquedano statue are active agents of the co-creation of meaning in social narratives, and therefore of the construction of who we are as society. Statues and monuments in public spaces tell us of a history of place, more often than not of an official history, the history of the conquerors that by their own interpretation of reality elevate characters and places to be worthy of remembrance. And in doing so, their choices as to whom will become our social memory often are not questioned. In the Americans today, however, the skepticism about the so-called national heroes of the past and who has been forgotten and made visible because of them has grown. It is within this climate that I argue that Baquedano's monument is a non-human actor that through its mutations contributed to the social discourse, developed its own agency as scenographic object that is simultaneously an activist, a confrontationist, and a social media influencer. Here, it is important to draw the distinction between scenography and scenographic. Richard Hans defines scenography as the relational practice that occurs between design elements, light, environment, object, sound, and costume of the theater, and the scenographic, understood as a practice that evokes the methods of scenography, but not necessarily of the theater, and that focuses on the agency of design practice in a state of revelation. Baquedano Monument is one of such scenographic objects. Furthermore, the monument is a site-specific object, insofar as its public relevance is in link to its site, the plaza, and its meaning for the inhabitants of Santiago and citizens of Chile. Contextualizing Baquedano's mutation as a site-oriented work. Moreover, I argue here that the mutation of the monuments through time and the corpus of images that circulated and continue to do so, whereas in the actual space, in the news or in social media, are a continuum that is impermanently referenced to itself and therefore will include its future iterations. However, to be able to place Baquedano Monument among the actors of social fabric of Chile, we first need to understand the context and cultural public demonstration on the country. The years of democracy that came after the overthrow of the dictatorial regime of Pinochet in the 1990s were infused by the social discontent that the constitution of the 80s brought to the country. During the last 30 years, massive protests have mobilized the country demanding social changes. It is important to underscore that protests in Chile are usually accompanied by artistic ingenuity. The morning dress of the women marches of the dictatorship years have made their ways to demonstration with constructed objects, such as a Dragon Ball Z to power the education reform in 2011. This tradition has to continue today, and some examples can be seen in the characters of the social outburst, such as Aunt Pikachu, a protester using a Pikachu costume in Plaza Dignidad that went viral with a little dance, and now is one of our constitutional elected persons. Or the Negro Matapacos, the Black Cop Killer, a dog that became famous during the 2011 protests and subsequently a symbol of the social outburst. In October 6 of 2019, a call for massive action by the students' movement, #Evasión Masiva, to avoid paying the increased 30 pesos for public transportation in the major cities of Chile took place. The call not only provoked the fare evasion, in addition, public massive demonstration occurred simultaneously throughout the main cities of the nation. The seeds for the civil unrest and the social outburst was planted. In October 18, 2019, the historic protest that started the social outburst occurred, and it was prolonged until the government imposed curfew due to the onset of COVID-19 in March 2020. After a whole year of uncontrollable protests. The Dignity Square at Ground Zero. The plaza, officially named Baquedano in 1928, after the monument of Manuel Baquedano that we see in the slide, commander of the army during the War of the Pacific from 1879 to 1884, was designed as a traffic circle to join Providencia to Alameda Avenue. These two avenues run parallel to the river Mapocho and are the principal artery of the city, connecting the over 6 million of residents. The plaza is a place of convergence for the city inhabitants anytime there is a need to celebrate or to protest. It is a space character of Santiago. The plaza was the heart of Ground Zero, a larger area of downtown Santiago that was taken and controlled by protesters and completely transformed by their aesthetics of resistance. Some of the street art demonstrating this aesthetic is shown on the slides. Each one contained a layer after layer of national symbols, historical, popular, and political, as well as the characters of the social outburst. The Baquedano monument became a symbol of the government oppression and disrespect of its peoples. Through its interventions, transformations, and final removal, a performative narrative was established between the protest and the media and the government. The anger provoked the inequality of the country economic system during 30 years of broken promises to the working class. Due to Pinochet's liberal economic model constitution, the 1% has concentrated over 40% of the national wealth. Community groups demanding change in the pension and health system, immigrants, women, and First Nation rights demanding at least a living wage to have some dignity. And thus, the Plaza embodied the demands by becoming Plaza Dignidad, the center stage of the ground zero. At its main actors, Baquedano's monument, transformations embody these different groups. Ground zero was impenetrable by the police and was maintained by protesters, barricades, and direct police confrontation. The protests were violent. At the end of the social outburst, there was a count of at least 30 dead and 460 protesters with permanent eye damage. Here we see the statue being taken with the flags of the Gualmapu, or the Mapuches, original people of the south of Chile. In the slide, we see Mapuche people retaking the monument as a sign that becomes both a protest and a conquest. Protest because Baquedano had an important military role in the process of colonial occupation of Mapuche territory at the end of the 19th century, and also represents the continuous military intervention to their lands. And of conquest, because by occupying the monument within the center of the city of Santiago, the Mapuches reclaim or hope to reclaim their power of governing their own territory taken by the colonizers. Here, Baquedano is a site-oriented scenographic object that binds together the past history and future possibilities, while acting both as a physical platform of social visibility and an allegory of socio-political power reversal. In this slide, memes showing Mapuche people placed instead of Baquedano, making visible a history that the nation has chosen not to see. But furthermore, amplifying Baquedano's role as a social actor, since its base is so iconic that even empty is a social staging with an image or an object that replaces it immediately receives its power, making us believe that maybe changing the monuments of the colonizer can change the narrative of our present history and therefore the future. Many memes of Mapuche peoples erected in place of Baquedano have gone viral. During the Women's March, the monument was taken by attaching flags and signs, while the site was activated by the protests and chants of women raising their fists in defiance, while wearing the women abortion rights green scarf on their wrist. Here, the space character of the plaza, which is the center stage of the social outburst, magnified the demands of the women, while the Baquedano monument helps focus and concentrate the protest, acting as the status quo, the patriarchy, that needs to be taken down and replaced. Again, the scenographic object shifts its meaning of representation from one of colonial power to one patriarchal power, being an actor in the creation of the social narrative, in which it represents a singular and accumulative concentration of power that is being challenged by a pluralist and hopefully an inclusive one. The meme of Gabriela Mistral, a Chilean 1945 Nobel laureate in literature, merged the graffiti with the site-oriented monument. The contemporary Gabriela is a plotted image with a different body, wearing pants and the women's right scarf. This image has been taken from the walls of the buildings around the ground zero. Here, the multiple meanings are layered into the meme. First of all, the perception of the Chilean nationhood. We Chileans believe, and this is true, that Chile is a country of poets. Second, a black and white image could mean mourning, a different time, a written text, or a simple aesthetic choice. In any case, the base of Baquedano established the meme of Gabriela with the others that have been there before, maybe saying that she's a better replacement for Baquedano's hero of our history. Would it be a better representation, a woman instead of a man, a poet instead of a military commander, a person standing in their own feet instead in the back of another being, in the back of another being? carrying a flag instead of a weapon? The narratives of construction of meaning of Baquedano scenographic objects keep compounding. On November 15 of 2019, Abel Acuña fell on the Plaza Dignidad. A paramedic who tried to give him CPR was shot by the police. An ambulance would appear within 6 minutes could not reach him because of the water cannons and the tear gas canisters. According to medical reports, Abel could have been saved if it were not because of the police repression. Acuña died that day in the Plaza Dignidad. The next dawn, the monument had been intervened with a canvas with the word peace on it. In the slide, however, we see a sign commemorating the event in the similar monument in the city of Rome. Baquedano scenographic object, which has stretched out of its site and by visual similarities, calling to its meaning other objects and locations that by reception and context are contributing to the creation of social cultural narrative. Baquedano has become a scenographic object of site mobility. On November 15 of 2019, after the national agreement for a new constitution had been approved, Plaza Dignidad was dressed with a white canvas and with a peace banner hanging from the monument. Space, character, and site-oriented objects became one in an aesthetic unification utilizing the color white and the fabric material. This intervention that was attributed to the ruling party and was taken as an offense by the protest caused public controversy. Here, the scenographic object's weight of the already acquired meaning cannot be made invisible by one simple gesture. The meme that utilizes the materiality of the intervention, in this case the fabric, to allude to sweeping under the rug, covering the truth, and the justice under this one gesture. Here is a great example of the role of the scenographic object within the construction of social narrative, this going back and forth between place, object, and social media that occurs within the country. In October 16 of 2020, in a commemoration of a year after the outburst, protesters painted the monument of Baquedano red. The reactions were immediate. In less than 24 hours, the monument was repainted to its original color by the authorities, but not before the news and social media had reproduced the bloody monument hundreds of times. Baquedano called into itself to the police and its responsibility for excessive violence and repressions, and since the scenographic object is a representation of the status quo, the red stained the hands of the government with the blood and the death of the blind. The burning of Baquedano was again a demonstration showing anger against the status quo, but also implying the possibility of a rebirth, of a different future, and provoked the removal of the document. At 2 a.m. in the morning of March 12 of 2021, with military honors, during the pandemic government-imposed curfew, the monument of General Manuel Baquedano was removed after 93 years due to constant acts of vandalism. That's what we are told. Baquedano scenographic objects. Baquedano scenographic objects plays a fundamental role in the process of construction and deconstruction of socio-political narratives of the city, understanding that Plaza Dignidad and Baquedano as the locus of collective social memory give us particular relevance to the role of scenographic transformation that Baquedano has gone through, and how each of these instances reveal a pluralist narrative that includes multiple communities of Chileans inhabitants. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcela, for the presentation. And we do have time for questions and comments. So I'm gonna invite Carla back on stage, and we should have our other presenters back on screen as well.
Okay, thank you very much for all the presentations that we have had and asking questions such as where are we as a society, how are we doing with righting the injustices and oppressions and prejudice that we have inherited. How are we doing with it? Where are we with it now? We have time for questions. Do we have any questions from the floor? Or would any of the presenters like to respond to other presenters? So, Heloisa, Renato, Sergio, Carla, Marcela. Yes, Renato, go ahead.
Hello. So I just would like to say that it's really strong for me and for us to see the huge connection between all of these presentations that reveals our situation. And it's very important, I think, as Latin America, we stay here today presenting and talking and crossing and sharing and saying what we need and we must say globally. So thank you. It was very important to hear all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comment. Heloisa?
I just want to thank you a lot too, because it was very impressive, the common situation in Latin America we are all living, and the expressing and the reactions are very similar, and it's very strong. We have to connect this power to help each other to improve our liberty and artistic creations. Thank you.
Do we have any questions from the floor? No? Carla, would you like to make a comment?
No, yes, I agree with Renato. It's really, I don't know, I feel like a connection with the other presentations, and it's for me important that all of us are looking for the idea of the visibilization, the use of theater, art to make a place for making visible what have been closed, have been hidden for so many years, of many centuries, not years. So I think it's right to learn.
Marcela, yes.
Yeah, I will agree with all the presenters too, and it's really strong to see in images also, all these concentrated images that sometimes we have them in the news here and there, but see them all in a presentation, it kind of blows your mind. And in that way, I have two questions. I would like the team of Brazil, if they can talk a bit more about the presentation with the cars going backwards, and if the team of Mexico could talk a bit more about the work of the Zapatecas when they were with the numbers in the head. I will wanted to understand how that particular performance functioned.
Do you want to start?
Okay.
Yes, Renato, please start.
Well, if I start.
Better.
Well, this was the silent walk that the Zapatistas made on the day that it was supposed that was the end of the world. It was in December of 2012 that it was a Mayan design that, or a Mayan, I say that, it's supposed to be the end of the world in that day. So they go out from, or go down from the mountains and appear in the city of San Cristobal de las Casas, with all these people masked and without saying anything. And that other cartoon that I show you, the one that said "Escucharon," did you hear? Was part of this. It was the relation with this action for the Zapatistas.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carla. Renato?
So, reverse, it was a huge intervention that happened at Paulista Avenue in São Paulo. I made part of the process in the end, and it was a huge and very complex structure trying to put this on the city. In that moment, we had in Brazil 100,000 victims from the pandemic. And so in that moment, it was a kind of a scandal in Brazil. And we had the opportunity to, with Teatro da Vertigem and a very important artist from visual arts in Brazil, Nuno Ramos, and Eric Rocha. It was the movie maker that filmed all of this huge intervention. And to put this inside the city, really offering a contrast between the movement of the city that in that moment was like very slow, and creating this huge ambience and narrative in the opposite side. So in the end of the journey, it was the provision in the beginning, it was like about 1 hour, 1 hour 30. In the end, we had like 4 hours long of performance. So it was a very long situation. And in the end, at the cemetery, we had like a musician playing our national hymn in reverse also. It was this allegory of an idea that all the culture, everything, every actions just are in the opposite side, in the opposite direction. So let's make visible this opposition and show and share this with the city and people.
Wonderful, thank you very much. There is a question, Carolina.
Hello, yes. Thank you all for the wonderful presentations. And I was wondering, what is the response of the police, for example, in such situations when artists are expressing themselves in the public space? Is there any sign of repression from the police? Well, coming from France, there are, we have a lot of police repression, but the way that the population is expressing themselves is not so artistic in a way. It's so I'm just curious to know what is the response from the police.
Okay, Marcela.
Well, I can answer in relation to the project that I was covering, which was within the ground zero during the social outburst. So the fight was incredible. It was permanent confrontation in which what it was called Primera Línea, or the first line of fighters. They were organized protests that they had shields, makeup shields, that they will protect the entrance of the police to the plaza. So they will put their bodies there. So then the plaza was never not taken, and everybody else could protest in peace because they were putting their bodies in the front line. And from there are the majority of the blind people, injured people, and dead people, this young group of men and women actually who were protecting the entrance to the location.
Thank you very much. Carla?
Okay, I don't know exactly. In Mexico, it can be different if there is an artistic works from some special people than others. I think it's a continuous negotiation with the government, with the police, and always I think it has a kind of this don't obey. It's part of making that kind of art to take apart the law, to be I don't know, sorteando, la palabra, I don't remember the word, like just going through and look what happened and face everything come with about the police and with the government. Or I'm sorry, I'm not.
Yeah, thank you. And in Brazil, Renato?
In Brazil, I can't.
Sergio.
Oh, Renato, do you want to answer? Or can I try to?
No, please go, Sergio.
It depends on the situation. Sometimes, for example, the marcha ahead that we saw and that we were talking about, it was combined that something is going to happen in the Police Avenue. So they did it, it's allowed. So it's okay, we don't have the policy interference. But sometimes if it's spontaneous, it can have any kind of situation like that police can interfere. For example, the Borpagato, there was a huge thing that happens there to try to avoid and to block everything and to try to discover who were the members that were related to this event. And it depends on the situation. If it's something artistic, we can try to talk and say what's happening. And sometimes we have problems with the police because if it's not allowed, you are there and the thing can go in the wrong way.
Yes, Heloisa.
I'd like to say that in politic manifestations, we have lots of repression. The police attacks with gas bombs and rubber shots. And even in the metro, for example, nowadays it's forbidden to play music or to play artistic manifestations. People used to occupy the spaces, but nowadays it's forbidden. People can't do it anymore. And it's like Sergio talked, when it's I think that is combined with the government, they are allowed to do, but spontaneous things usually are repressed.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the time and would like to wrap up. The question, where are we, is more directed to the we, the oppressed, the wronged, the forgotten. And where are we? We are here. Thank you very much for putting those issues on the stage and sharing those wonderful interventions, protests, and projects for us here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we will take a shorter break. Let's start on the hour at 4 o'clock with Chris and company. So 10 minutes, 12 minutes time. Let's start on the hour at 4 o'clock. Thank you very much.